There are quite a few Magic sets that mean a lot to me personally, especially from those early years, because a lot of them tend to tell the story of where I was and what I was doing at that point in my life. There was one entire autumn that I spent as a preteen frantically opening packs of Chronicles, trying to find a concordant crossroads for some reason. I think I finally found exactly one copy. There was the magical Christmas where I crept downstairs to open packs of Alliances and actually got the Balduvian Horde I had wished for. There was an entire summer after Urza's Destiny came out that I spent trying to learn the ins and outs of Yawgmoth's Bargain combo and really level up my game. And all of these are kind of formative experiences that made me the person I am today in some ways, especially considering I get to do this for a living. And yet, kind of surprisingly, given the heavy hitters in the early Magic lineup, right? But also given the fact that I've already ranted and raved about a dozen or so early sets on this channel, there is a set that means an awful lot to me and I never really get to talk about because of all the early sets in Magic history. There are very few that mean as much to me as Invasion. You see, when I was 11 years old, here's where things get sad for just a second, my father passed away suddenly. This, as you might imagine, took me some time to get over, and I really didn't want to go back to school because I didn't really have a lot of friends there to begin with. But when I did go back to school, there was a kid that I had only really interacted with on a couple of occasions before this, but one day he passed me a note. Now, this note said that his father had also very recently passed away, which I had no idea about. And he basically said that he knew we didn't know each other very well, but if I ever needed somebody to talk to or be friends with even, who kind of knew what I was going through, and I think that was important for him to have as well, then, reach out to him and we'll talk. And long story short, we actually became very good friends, not only over that summer, but over the course of many years, we were best friends. Now, it wasn't too long after I met him and we started actually hanging out together and stuff that he introduced me to Magic the Gathering. So I guess you have him to thank if you like this channel at all. By the way, thanks, bud. I probably wouldn't be doing this without you, but one way or the other, I really, really like this game, as you can probably see, not only because of the mechanics and themes and such, but also because I just kind of thought my dad would really like it. Now let's skip forward a bit. At this point, years go by. We remain good friends throughout middle and high school, and then we turn 18, at which point he receives his Social Security check from his father passing away. Now, most of my Social Security money went to send me to a private school that I really didn't want to be in the entire time, and I still kind of wish I hadn't gone to, but that's still entirely beside the point, and I need to let it go. He gets his Social Security check, and he gets himself a nice little place to be, a nice little car to drive around, and he spends a good bit of money on the newest Magic the Gathering set, which you may have guessed at this point was Invasion. Now, this was a big moment for him, obviously, right? But also kind of for me. This was my best friend, and it was the first time anyone that I knew had their own place, an unimaginable slice of freedom at the time. It was a freedom that I, and to be honest, especially him, had wanted for a very long time. So we celebrated him finally being able to experience it by opening Invasion, a set that would become really special to me for, I think, very obvious reasons. And with all that set up, I think you know exactly how sentimental this set is to me. So if you don't mind today, I'd like to take a quick tour of a set that means way more to me than it means to a lot of people. Let's take a look at Invasion. And I'm your favorite Magic channel's favorite Magic channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech. And we're back, like in Sub-Zero. By the way, this is a hole in my shirt. I can't just brush it off my shoulder, so I'm sorry if it irritates you. It got hot in here. There's lights. I had to take my jacket off. I hope you understand. However, I think I might be able to just kind of fold it over like that. Does that work? Yeah, I actually solved a problem. Good job. That's why you come to this channel, Life Hacks. But anyway, let's talk about Invasion, because I really, really want to. I fear that with each passing moment, this set is in more and more danger of being covered over entirely by the sands of time. With each tick of the clock, this set becomes more and more of a hidden gem, which is a bit crazy because in terms of Vorthos stuff, a lot happens in this set. We're talking about a Phyrexian invasion here, bud. We just had one of those not long ago and it seemed to have some consequence. And this set had an awful lot of impact too. So I kind of struggle to understand why it's not cared about more. That's even more surprising given how many amazing cards are actually in this set. I think that it's probably most famous for being the set that Factor Fiction was first printed in. By the way, fun story about this card, that same friend that I was talking about in the intro asked me how I felt about this card when it came out. And 17-year-old Dev said, meh. I don't think it's actually very good. He tried to convince me it was actually bonkers, and of course, he was very much right. I was totally wrong. I was 17, cut me a little bit of slack. He was 18, he had a little bit more experience, whatever. But one way or the other, Fact or Fiction is obviously a busted card from this era and did a lot of work for a very long time. This set is also, though, the first set Opt was printed in. If you want some more iconic blue card draw, there's a lot of it in this set. But in this set, we also got to see, for the first time, some mechanics that would go on to be beloved by the community, right? We got split cards in this set, like Wax Wayne. We got Assault and Battery in this set, and everyone loves split cards. They've continued to expand upon them over the years because players like them so much. But did you know, Invasion is also the debut of the kicker mechanic, a sub-mechanic that, again, is very well loved by the MTG community, and they still keep doing stuff with it to this day because we like it so much. This set is also home to one-time competitive all-stars like Rout, Chromatic Sphere, and even Fires of Yavimaya, which put Gruul aggro back on the map. But even with Fires in the set, this was not entirely an aggro set. Not only have we talked about Fact or Fiction and Opt, but there were plenty of other iconic counterspells for Control to fight back with, like Undermine and the terrifying Absorb. Even when you step outside the world of nostalgia or one-time competitive use, there are really popular commanders in this set, like Hannah Ship's Navigator, Rhea Dawnbringer's in here, and of course, Captain Cisse was first printed in Invasion. Not only that, but it's also home to heavily played cards in the 99 in Commander, things like Phyrexian Altar, which I know you love, and you know I love, Planar Portal, which goes in tutors for anything, and was important more towards the early days of EDH, and Empress Galena, which is pretty obviously busted in Commander once you read that text. And it got some slick artifact and enchantment removal that still sees play in Commander too, stuff like Artifact Mutation, Aura Mutation, and of course Aura Charge, which still commands a pretty steep price tag. But while we're on enchantments, there are some all-time enchantments that people love in this set too. Things like Armadillo Cloak, which is not a joke, Teferi's Moat, things like Sterling Grove, which goes really well in those Enchantress decks. So again, just even when you're talking about just enchantments as a type line, there's a ton of amazing and again, iconic stuff in Invasion. I hate to keep using that word, but it definitely fits. However, I don't mean to imply that every single card in Invasion is good or iconic. As a matter of fact, kind of ironically, a lot of the cards that we thought were going to be amazing when the set first came out didn't really pan out at all, ever. So I guess for your comedic viewing enjoyment, and so you get to laugh at all of us old school Magic boomers for having weird thoughts, here's a quick top 10 of all the cards we thought were going to be good when the set came out, because it is laughable. Number 10 is Blurred Mongoose. You see, this can't be the target of spells or abilities at all. It has Shroud, an early version of Shroud, which I think we all know at this point is not actually very good or fun because you can't put auras and stuff on it, and that kind of sucks, but it is a mongoose, so a couple of points for that, and people still to this day do love this card, and it didn't do too horribly when the set came out, but it hasn't really stood the test of time. Number 9 is Skizik. Quick little fun fact here, if you pluralize Skizix, it's a palindrome, but that's really the only interesting thing about this card. We thought it was a new Ball Lightning when it came out. It's not, it's just kind of bad. Number 8 is Kavu Titan. You see, on the one hand, this is a bad creature, but if you kick it, it's a bad creature. Neither mode is really on rate like you want it to be, and all the magazines said this card was going to be amazing when it came out, and then it kind of wasn't. It just turns out you can always be doing something better for either 2 or 5 mana. Number 7 is Void. This is a Rakdos sweeper, but not really. This never takes all the things that you want it to take, even though it can also hit the opponent's hand, and that's really, really exciting. Still, it's not good. It's just kind of not good. You only have to play like 2 games with Void before you're like, this card sucks, actually, and you take it out of your deck. Speaking of Rakdos, number 8 is Blazing Spectre. You see, it's a Hypnotic Spectre, but it's not at all. Hypnotic Spectre. Wizards kept printing 4 mana Hypnotic Spectres after a while to kind of power down the card a little bit. They used to do that, and it never was good. Turns out one of the big strengths to Hypnotic Spectre was being able to Dark Ritual into it. And when you can no longer really do that on turn 1, the card's not good because it turns out Hypnotic Spectre's kind of not great anyway. It needs Dark Ritual to be good. So, you know, once you start making it 4 mana and it comes down turn 2, but turn 4 more often than not, it's just terrible. This card was always bad. Number 5 is Molimo, a legendary creature that is basically just a Wrenn and 7 token. So it isn't good. I think we can just skip the rest of the description on that one. You can tell this card's really bad and very expensive. Number 4 is Utopia Tree. I will give this one some points because I still love the art, and the fruit looks really, really good, but at this point we are far beyond this card being playable at all. Again, this is in the age when they were actively powering some stuff down and they were like, yeah, you can't have Birds of Paradise in standard, but you can pay 2 mana for a non-flying birds. Okay, sure, we'll take it. It's pretty good. And it actually did do some stuff in standard, but again, how many cards are better than this at this point? It's like Lawn of War Loam Speaker is a million times better and nobody really plays with that. So we'll look at Urza's Rage at the number 3 spot here. This card, Wizards is trying so hard to make iconic. I feel like they put it in a couple of different bonus sheets and stuff. I think it might be in a secret layer, but don't quote me. But I know it's been on multiple bonus sheets at this point. And I don't think Urza's Rage is quite as iconic as they want it to be. This is another one that didn't really pan out, even though when you read it, you really want it to be awesome. But it just, I don't think I've ever kicked this card in my life. And I have played decks with 4 copies of Urza's Rage. So that's not good. Number 2 is Pyre Zombie. More Rakdos stuff that we thought was going to be amazing. Pyre Zombie really looks like it's going to be good. It's bad. Just kind of take my word for it. We all tried Rakdos decks when Invasion came out. They weren't good. A lot of strong looking Rakdos cards on this very list. We all had high hopes for, we didn't even call it Rakdos. Black Red's going to be really good. No, it's bad. And then number 1 is Sabo's Web. You see, we had a card called Rishadan Port back in the day. It was really annoying. It was so annoying. It would tap down your lands and you can't do stuff. They tap them down in your upkeep. It was really lame. So when Sabo's Web came out, everyone was like, oh, it draws you a card and it blows up their port. It doesn't blow it up. It keeps them from using their port. It's bad. The card was like $20 when it came out. It was the chase rare in the set. And it's just kind of a 2-of sideboard card. So that's all it really ended up being. And not even for that long, to be honest. So Sabo's Web, I remember you, and I may be the only person. I guess if you wanted kind of an honorable mention or a bonus card in this category, Sleeper's Robe. Sure. Ophidian was a huge creature at the time. It's a thing that if it gets through for combat damage, you can have it deal no combat damage, and instead you draw a card. Really important in sort of the counterspell, the control decks of the early days, what we call draw go. So people really liked Ophidian effects back in the day, and now they print them at common and literally nobody cares. But people really freaked out about this thing, especially publications like Inquest magazine when the set first came out. And it turns out that it's not good. It was never good. Auras are just kind of bad generally, right? It doesn't actually provide any PT boost, and it's just not good. It's just not a card that you really want to be playing, especially back in the day when you couldn't play tempo as effectively a lot of the time. So I just, there's problems with this card, but I really wanted to like it, and I bought the hype from Inquest, but I should tell you that the card is just bad. But now, I guess, let's do the opposite of the thing we just did. And instead of looking at cards we thought were going to be amazing back then and then were just awful, we'll look at cards that we didn't really look at too much back then, and it turns out they're actually kind of commander sleepers at this point. You may have heard of a few of these cards, but I would imagine that the vast majority, there's probably a few cards on this list you have never seen in your life. And it turns out, just like there's a lot of iconic cards in Invasion, there's a lot of buried cards in Invasion. A lot of people haven't looked at this set in a while. I think there's a lot of cards in here that might surprise you with their efficacy. I guess I'll do the honorable mention first this time. Sure, there's Breath of Daragaz in this set, so if you don't have like Mizium Mortars or you're just looking for like another red sort of sweepery thing, this will do the job for you, and it's kind of not bad at all, in fact. But number 10, why don't I just look down at my piece of paper and cheat for a second here? I'm a professional YouTuber, is Mana Maze. Right here, kind of really obnoxious sort of rule of law effect in blue that kind of steps on your ability to counter some blue spells, but that's not a big deal. A lot of the time, it actually means that if you cast a blue spell, your opponents can't counter it, which I think is actually a neat little effect of the card too. But number 9 on the list is Shivan Harvest. This is a neat little thing too, right? This, if you're playing like Rakdos Judith or something else that wants to sacrifice creatures in the right colors, then suddenly this becomes a neat little way to do that while also blowing up non-basic lands at a decent cost. Number 8 is Overabundance, which is a kind of mana flare that punishes them for getting the extra mana, and they can't choose to not be punished in that way. I mean, I guess you got to watch out too, but still, a mana flare that hits people is kind of interesting. Number 7 is Divine Presence right here. This basically means that no one can take big damage, which is more than a little interesting on a commander table. Matter of fact, Invasion is full of really interesting cards, especially in the context of a commander table, like number 6, Dueling Grounds. Only one thing can attack, only one thing can block every single combat. That gets really fun when there's multiple players. So really neat card that I'm surprised you don't see more of. Speaking of weird stuff, kind of along these same lines, number 5 is Fight or Flight. This is Again, really interesting on a commander table, if nowhere else in the world, right? Basically, whenever they attack, you separate their guys into two piles, and they can only attack with one of those piles. So if they have more than one guy that you don't want to get hit by, just put them in different piles. That's kind of sick. If anyone ever comes to attack you, they'll probably just not bother to do that and attack other people on the table. Number 4 is Global Ruin, which I'm not going to talk too long about other than to say it's an Armageddon effect. So that's... seems okay. Number 3 is Sabo Tavok. Read that text box. Seems like it's okay in a game of Commander for the same reasons that like Empress Galena is pretty decent in a game of Commander. Number 2 is Vile Consumption. I tweeted this card the other day and was just like, no, cool card. But I actually have a lot more things to say or think about it than that. What an unbelievable card. There, that's basically it. One way or the other. Again, on a commander table, creatures are things that people tend to have an awful lot of, especially certain decks that play tokens and they just have like 30 guys on the board, like elves that has like 20 guys on the board at the same time. So this card becomes really ridiculous and impactful in the mid to late game on a lot of commander tables. And I'm really surprised I don't see more people playing it, especially given the price tag is really cheap at this point. But number 1 was almost Collective Restraint, but I feel like too many people know this card exists. This wasn't necessarily the debut of Domain as a keyword creature or a keyword mechanic or anything like that, but this was, I think, the first set where it really mattered if you had like all 5 of the basic land types out. Collective Restraint is a really good example of that, basically a propaganda effect that they have to pay like 5 for, or, 3 if you're playing 3 colors, which is still better than propaganda if you're counting, so that's not bad. But I felt like a slightly better card than that people haven't necessarily talked about as much is Spirit of Resistance. If you control a permanent that's every color, you just don't take damage, which is just a pretty stupid line of text if you have like a Sliver Queen or like any 5-color commander. I have seen this pop up in commander discussions from time to time, but nowhere near as often as I feel is warranted. If you go to EDHREC and look at all the 5-color commanders right now, you will not find this in the played cards of very many of them, which kind of perplexes me because it's just kind of stupid. Now we're almost done with our tour of Invasion, but I did want to stop off and just look at some other notable cards before we get out of here, because there are some cards that I would just kick myself forever if I didn't talk about them in the one chance that I got to talk about Invasion. So let's just run through some fun ones here, like Obliterate, which is, the ultimate Wrath effect, kind of a reprint of Yockelhops, which is always good to see. Twilight's Call, which is kind of a reprint of Living End, except you can play it at instant speed. So again, why don't people play some of these cards in Commander more often? There's Meteor Storm, which is kind of doing a Stormbind impression, a card that I really liked back in the day, but the random discard kind of sucks, but still 4 damage to a target is a lot. So if you have the mana and the cards, you can do a lot of damage with a Meteor Storm. But there's also Verdaloth the Ancient if you care about creature type stuff. This set actually gave us access to some creature type specific stuff that we don't get very often, like Verdaloth and Kanji Airy Keeper, who will help your birds out if you care. There's also just plain cool cards like Saproling Infestation, which looks a lot better today than it did back then because Kicker has been in 3 or 4 other sets since they printed this card. So Saproling Infestation is just off the charts at this point in terms of viability in your commander deck. A kicker deck is actually a thing that you can build, and Infestation is gross in it. There's this cycle that I've always liked of masters, they're called, right? Basically, they're like 4 mana dudes that you pay a couple of mana and you tap them down and they can cast 1 of 2 spells. And I love dudes like this. There are apprentices in this set that are all like 1 mana, and you pay 1 mana, you tap them, and they cast different spells, basically. These first got, we first got to see these in Mirage, I believe. As a set, but they sort of came back in Invasion, and this time instead of just apprentices, we also got masters, and these guys are just so cool to me. Even though they never see play anywhere, I just want to be the one dude on the internet talking about them because I think they're awesome. I would be remiss if I didn't at least bring up this cycle of legendary dragons that were really hyped back in the day because we all love dragons and we still do. And to be honest, some of these still look kind of fun to throw in a commander deck, either in the 99 or even as your commander. You get to play a few different colors, and some of them have really splashy effects. Aside from that, I should also bring up that this is, of course, the set that Coalition Victory was first printed in. You might not be able to play it in commander, but it is still an iconic and beloved Magic card. But that's basically it for our tour of Invasion, unless you want to talk a little bit about these islands, some of the most gorgeous islands in Magic history. I love this little island right here, literally an island. Too many islands don't actually depict islands. Or they depict some weird version of a thing that's technically an island. No, this is an island. It's a tropical island. It's got palm trees and a rock. And there's something about that I love. There's also this other island that's just like a big green, like upside down U or something. It looks, I love the islands in this set so much. And again, I only get one shot, Mom Spaghetti, to talk about Invasion, so I want to bring up everything that I love about this set while I can. But I'm pretty sure once I've exhausted basic lands, I'm probably done for a video, so hopefully that was all I wanted to get out of my system about this incredible set that means an awful lot to me, and I will always remember the summer that I spent at my best friend's house cracking open packs and building decks from this set. It means an awful lot to me, and I hope I was able to impart some of my love for the set onto you. Now for our next video, we'll get back to Standard. The patrons actually voted on an interesting one this time around. We're going to tier list Standard, but not the best decks in Standard. You already know what those are. Instead, we're going to tier list the off-meta decks in Standard, and I think that'll be a way more interesting video to watch. But for now, I hope that you guys enjoyed, and me just indulging myself in nostalgia here, which is what I like to do every now and again on this channel, right? We talk about Standard an awful lot, but old school Magic means so much to me, and it's because, again, a lot of these old sets have personal stories attached to them for me, and Invasion is a really important one. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down there in the comments what sets you'd like to kind of see me do this with. Again, you know, sometimes we do old school top 10s and stuff like that, but I kind of really like doing it this way. You know, we get to do like multiple top 10s in a format like this. So just let me know how you felt about everything here, the format and what sets you kind of want to hear someone talk about in this kind of depth. Aside from that, you can help us out by liking the video, putting in more recommended feeds. You can comment, which kind of does the same thing a little bit. Algorithms are weird and tricky. You can also subscribe, which helps me out immensely and doesn't cost you anything. But if you wanted to, you could join the Patreon. Any little bit helps, but we got plans as low as $1 a month, and those will allow you to vote on what videos we do here on the channel. Aside from that, you can watch me play some Magic on Twitch. There's lots of ways that you can, you know, get content into your eyeballs from the channel. But if you do any of the things I've just listed in the last like 30 seconds, I will greatly appreciate you for it. But aside from that, it's basically Allski Kowalski, and I'm donezo for this onezo, so I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from the place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind. Merry Christmas, Kev.